Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc., an alternative parties books publisher, sponsors this podcast. I'm Andrew Bouchard. Joshua.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast.
Good to be here.
Today we have the Purple People's Party on, and Joshua is their representative. We're going to talk about the party, and also Joshua was asking me about how to establish a political party, and that's something I've done before. So I'd like to talk to Joshua about that and share that with you. So let's get started by you kindly giving us an introduction to yourself, a brief biographical sketch.
Well, I got a degree in philosophy and mathematics, and kind of studied a lot of different materials and stuff like that. So government was one of those things that I came into that I was interested in. So I guess that's the best I can do for my biographical sketch. Not much there.
So I study philosophy too, so I take that philosophy can help your political views. It can formulate your political views.
Yeah, definitely. I think learning logic and stuff like that. Instead of just taking what somebody tells you, you can uh, discern it a little bit better and decide on the decisions you're going to make instead of just going with your party or whatever.
Sure. So what caused you to start the Purple People's Party?
Well, that was February 1st of 2013. Um, uh, about the same time, Purple People's Party, it just kind of dawned on me, and I was like, oh, that's a great name for a political party, and it's purple because it's combining both red and blue. So it just, I figured I'd better go ahead and at least get a Facebook page on it, if not go further than that. So
I was wondering about the significance of the color purple. So purple, you said, it's the color that we use when we're talking about states and areas that are not red or blue. So that's the significance of purple, right?
right, it's actually the combination of red and blue. So it's taking Democrats and Republicans and mashing them together and making purple out of them.
Sure, makes sense.
Yeah. So theoretically, in order to be in the Purple People's Party, you got to be either Republican or Democrat to vote.
So what are the party beliefs and platform?
uh, so far, it's pretty open. I was listening to it's just me, so I don't want to limit it too much without actually having a party together to decide what a party's about. But I was listening to Coley's Pragmatic Party, and I find his pragmatism, his pragmatic party, be something that my party definitely agrees with, and uh, would would en- would encompass that as well. So the main idea is that in order to get the supermajority vote you need in Congress for certain issues like passing an amendment or veto, for restoring a bill that's been vetoed by the president or uh, impeaching a president, you need a two-thirds vote. So I figured the only way you can get a two-thirds vote is if you have one-third that's red, one-third that's blue, and one-third that's purple. So not sure how you would get those thirds, those thirds in Congress. It might take an amendment to pass, and to pass that amendment, you need a two-thirds majority, and I'm not sure, which party would even pass it. So it's kind of complicated. It's just kind of theoretical. Uh, it's meant to be simple. but achieving it's the hard part.
Definitely. So since you studied philosophy, did you study political philosophy? In my field in philosophy, we one of the courses we studied was political philosophy. So did you study that in your school?
Unfortunately, no, I didn't. I took I took federal government and I took state government. Uh, this is in Texas, and they were interesting enough to me that I remembered enough of them that when uh, Occupy happened, I participated in. Do you remember Occupy Wall Street?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I participated in the Occupy that was here in Portland, Oregon, and kind of that's kind of where I got my footstep into politics was, just seeing how this group of people were very organized, were trying to accomplish certain goals and stuff like that, and uh, they weren't able to accomplish those goals because they didn't have a working platform and they didn't have a representative. So um, I kind of took that as a uh, that's kind of where the philosophers of the Purple People's Party came from. That
So
and
I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, the problem I see with the government, the biggest problem is that the House is divided in two, and with the House is divided virtually 50-50, you can't get a whole lot done, and it allows the president to have more power than he should because he doesn't have to worry about being impeached. Won't happen. So I want to, create a political climate that's more, where a president has to worry about being impeached or, can you can't just veto any bill because, Congress can come back and restore the bill. So um, those are powers that Congress has, but not under this bipartisan, not under the current political regime. Under the current political regime, uh, the president has too much power and wasn't. I don't think this wasn't what was set up in the Constitution. I don't think our founding fathers intended for political parties like this to rise up, but I'm not sure that just the fact that we have two of them, we should have. We definitely need. We definitely need more. We definitely need to have at least like no more than a third can be one 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 party in the House.
So the different parties can serve as a checks and balance on themselves. Like we have the three branches of government, which in theory at least are supposed to serve as a check and balance on each other. So as are you seeing it as the three different, at least the three different parties being a check and balance on each other?
Yeah, yeah, that I agree
You're,
with.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you.
Okay. You were mentioning the Occupy Wall Street movement. I thought you raised an interesting point in saying that one of the problems with it was the lack of a leader. Now, some people will say it's good for political movements not to have leaders, they should be decentralized. So, how do you see the role of a leader to be a good leader that can move a movement ahead without being a dictator or an autocrat?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I I don't know that it. That's the thing is that like this political party that I'm starting, the Purple People's Party, is I've got the concept and I've laid it out, but I'm not necessarily trying to be the leader of it.
Okay.
I want it to be I want it to be a party. I want to have more input than just my own, which is why I haven't gone too heavily into exactly what it is because I want to get some more like-minded people together and create something. So, yeah. So this party doesn't necessarily need a leader; it just needs some people to put it together.
Okay, fair enough.
Mhm.
Which brings us to a question we want to discuss today. You were asking me how to establish a party officially. And because you're in Oregon, we can talk about how to do it there. And I've done this process before in two different states, Minnesota and Texas. So we can discuss how this works.
Okay, excellent.
There's two aspects of it. One is establishing the organization itself, which is a nonprofit organization. And then the second part is getting on the ballot. What I found in researching this, and before I met you, I was interested how you get a political party established. I did in Minnesota and I did in Texas, and it wasn't very clear the way it is if you want to establish a business or another nonprofit. Because if you want to do one of those, you write down what's on the Secretary of State's page, and usually it's you file an article, you file a charter of the the business, and then you file the bylaws, and then you do a fee, and then that's usually those two things are what most states require: the charter and the bylaws. But it's not so clear cut with political parties because, like I was saying at the start, there's two parts of it. One is establishing the organization, and one is getting on the ballot. So when I looked it up in Texas, and we'll get to what Oregon involves, I didn't see how to establish a political organization per se. The way they did mention how to get on the ballot. So we're going to discuss how to get on the ballot in Oregon and how to be a nonprofit in Oregon, because if most minor parties unfortunately aren't on the ballot and they still want to operate. So you want to establish a structure that allows you to operate. So hopefully one day you can be big enough to be on the ballot. Now, it is possible to get on the ballot without having that structure, but having that structure makes it more easier because you can do things like get a bank account. So let us pause here. And Joshua, let me know if you have any questions at this point.
I'm good so far.
Okay, excellent. So the part about establishing a nonprofit in Oregon, this is like if you want to do a nonprofit for a charity organization, maybe you want to help people who are refugees. It's very similar to this. So to establish a nonprofit in Oregon, you got to, they say on the website of the Secretary of State, the first step is to do research to see if somebody has used your name already. When we were doing the business for the business I run, Free Press Media Press Inc., which is it now, I searched the state files in Texas to see if anyone had the name in Texas. There are other organizations called Free Press, and there are other organizations called Free Press Media. We did call it Free Press Media as when the organization was a nonprofit. So when we went over to profit, I added Free Press Media Press. When you are doing your political party in Oregon or elsewhere, you want to research to see if anybody has your name in the party, in the state. It is possible that some states will be sticklers. On this podcast, we did review a case in which they wanted to deny the one party ballot access because their name was too similar to another name. It wasn't the exact same name, but it was too similar. They had a law in that state which said you can't have two parties that have any part of their name similar. And both of those parties were Socialist Party. One was the Socialist Party, and then the other one that was trying to get on the ballot was the Socialist. It was the one, I believe it was the Socialist Equality Party, I believe, but I could be wrong about that. The point being, fortunately, our side won because the court ruled that the names can't be, you can still have parts of the name in there as long as it's not the exact same name. So you still want to be cognizant of what other parties are in your area. And you don't want to have the same name. Now, you're probably not going to call your party the Green Party or the Libertarian Party, but there may be another party in your area that has a similar name that's established. So you do the research, or there might be an organization that has a similar name. There might be an organization called the Purple Party in Oregon that's a nonprofit or a profit-making organization. So you do the research to see that your name is not taken. And then the second part is, according to their Secretary of State in Oregon, and like we're saying, this is very similar to most states, is you select the business name and structure, they say. So let me compare this to a business. If you're establishing a business at the state, you can be an LLC, or you can be a corporation. You can also be a sole proprietor. You can be a partner. And those have different aspects to them, different benefits. If you want to read more about what is the best, just read Nolo Press books. They have a lot on this. Nonprofits have a similar situation because you can have a nonprofit corporation, or you can have a nonprofit unincorporated corporation, unincorporated group. So you want to choose whether it's corporated or not corporated. And that makes a difference in how you proceed. Businesses often want to be incorporated, or they want to have an LLC because that protects them from liability. A corporation protects a business. If you're a food truck and somebody eats some of your food and they get sick and they sue you, that person can't sue you for your personal bank account. They can sue you for your business bank account. A nonprofit organization might also be sued for various reasons. Maybe you're serving food to the homeless and somebody gets sick. They could theoretically sue you. So that's why somebody would want to be incorporated. That's one of the reasons. With a political party, there's not the same situation going on because you're not necessarily going to directly harm somebody potentially with your activities. There is a possibility if you have a fundraiser and you serve pizza and somebody gets sick, things like that can happen. So you want to ask yourselves, what's the likelihood of this going to happen? How much am I going to put stock into this happening? And is it worth it? Because you do have to pay a fee if you want to make a nonprofit corporation. Whereas if you go unincorporated, you don't necessarily have to pay a fee. And in Oregon, the Secretary of State's website says it's $50 to do the article of incorporation, which I mentioned earlier, another name for is charter. And then in Oregon, they require $50 every year. Texas is different. As for businesses, they certainly don't require any fees each month. And I looked into nonprofits too, and it doesn't look like they require an ongoing yearly fee. I mentioned that because your state might be like Oregon, or it might be like Texas, where you might have to pay an ongoing fee if you make your political organization, or you might not. So that's something you want to consider. If you only have $5 right now, then incorporating might be too much. So let's stop here and let me ask you, Joshua, do you have any questions at this point?
No, so far I'm good. $50 for the charter, that's not bad at all. So I'd have to set up the structure and check out the business name. So uh, I think I think
Excellent.
yeah, and I think it definitely is better to go. I think you would want to go corporated, wouldn't you? I mean, one would think so.
Ideally, yes. Now, I have chosen to go unincorporated for a couple reasons. One was because they do require some stuff in Texas, and I don't remember seeing it on the Secretary of State website, but nonprofit organizations are different than corporations because corporations in Texas and in many states, maybe Oregon is one of them too, you only need one person to start. So when I incorporated the business I run, I only needed me. So if you only have yourself at the moment, it's likely that Oregon will require more than one person to establish a nonprofit organization. So that could delay the process as you find the people who want to do that. And also for so you have to convince people to do that for you. If a lot of times when people start a political party, from what I've experienced and what I've gathered, what I've heard from other people is one person does a lot of the work in at the start, and then when it gets rolling, they attract more people. So in Oregon, you probably would have to have more than one person to serve different officer positions by state. In Texas, to establish a nonprofit corporation, you have to have, I believe it's 3 different officers, maybe it's 2, but it's more than one certainly.
Yeah,
So that's one reason why you would want to reconsider doing a corporation. If you have no problem attracting somebody to do it, then it wouldn't be an issue.
I see.
Also, money is an issue. If you did suggest that the $50 wouldn't be a big deal. In the grand scheme, it wouldn't be to most people in many circumstances. Now, when I recently put the political party I founded in motion in Texas officially, as you can certainly run a political party unofficially. It's better to do it officially, of course. When I did it officially, I didn't have the extra money to put forward to it. Yet I still want to get some motion going. So it depends on your circumstance. If you have plenty of money in the bank, then $50 up front and $50 every year might not be a big deal. But if your finances are directed in other ways, then it's something you want to wait for or choose a different structure. So that's why I chose at this point an unincorporated structure for the political party in Texas. I'm running a business right now, and that's consumes a lot of my energy. So I want to focus on that, both my time and my money. Yet at the same time, I also want to do some stuff to get this going. So yes, those are reasons why you might want to choose unincorporated. It depends on your circumstance. So incorporated is better in many circumstances. So if you can do that, that probably would be a best bet. If you're limited and you still want to get going, then I would recommend doing an unincorporated structure. You can still get started.
Right.
An unincorporated structure officially, as I was saying a little bit earlier, you can do anything unofficially. You can make a website, you can put up a platform, you can write a manifesto. So you want to do it officially if possible. Now, whether you are incorporating as in Oregon or elsewhere, or you're not, and you're doing it unincorporated like me at this point at least, one thing you want to do is get an EIN. And for those of you who do not know what an EIN is, it's an employment identification number. You get that with the IRS. The process is very easy. You go on to the IRS's webpage and you can often get it within moments of after filling out the form. So it's an automated process. It is possible that it could take longer if there's some glitch in there, if you've gotten more than one EIN. That happened to me when I was changing the form of my business, because at the start, I was a sole proprietor and then I incorporated it later along. And then I applied for an EIN online. I was hoping I could get it right away, but they said, no, we already had one in the system for you, so you're going to have to do it the other way. I would assume in most cases that's not going to apply, so you can probably get that online. Easy with the IRS. So before we get into the other aspects of that, do you have any questions about the EIN, Joshua?
No, I understand that.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
And that is very important because then you can officially take donations. You can officially do party functions that require money. So it's a big benefit. And then you'll want to keep track of this stuff. I am keeping track of this on paper. Now, some people are going to say, why on paper? Why don't you use one of the other things? This situation may not apply to you, but because I run a business, for the business, I do accounting on paper and electronically as a backup. And I like to, in case something goes wrong. Therefore, it's too complicated for me to also do this online too. I got a software that's free, a freeware software that you can pay donations to do the accounting. So if anybody out there, Joshua or anybody else, needs a referral for accounting software, that one is an excellent one to go because it doesn't cost too much. It's called GNU Cash, GNU Cash. You can use it for free, and I would recommend, if possible, giving them donations because they are providing us that if you are low on money for a month or 2 or 3 or 4 or 8, you don't have to do anything. You can still use software. If you have money, then give it to them. That's why it's better than using something like QuickBooks. And I like it because it's minimalist anyways. So the EIN is very powerful for a political party to have the ability to get donations. Most of the political parties we talk about on this podcast, they want donations. And that's how you go forward. Also, what you can do is get a tax exemption. Nonprofit organizations, you've heard of them being tax exempt. So you can also do that if you feel it's worth it. To me, it didn't seem worth it. Political organizations might or might not qualify. Also because the funds are not necessarily going to be in the millions of dollars. So it might not be worth it. And sometimes the organizations that are tax exempt, they're selling stuff, so they have to pay sales tax. If your political party is taking donations, then you might not have to need a tax exemption. And I did ask the Texas Comptroller's office if I needed a sales tax certificate. I didn't think I needed one, but I wanted to be safe because I told them that our political party is probably going to take donations and that's going to be it. And they said, you probably only need a sales tax form if you are going to sell tangible goods. Maybe your party is doing a fundraiser with merch. Maybe you want to sell bumper stickers. So if you do that through your party, you would need a tax exemption and a sales tax certificate from the state that you're in. Get a tax exemption. So there's two parts of that. One is if you want a tax exemption and you're selling stuff, then you need to get a sales tax permit from your state. And the second part is if you are getting a tax exemption, you need to file a form with the IRS for a tax exemption. And that way you wouldn't have to pay sales tax. So that's why a lot of people like that, because they can do that.
Yeah.
So then once you have those things going, you got your business registered with the state. If it's going to be incorporated, you can also consider if you need to do it in your local area, if you need to register with the county clerk. Sometimes when you, let me compare this to the business again. When I first had my business for the first few years, like I said, I did it as sole proprietor. I didn't do it under my name. And the counties require, in pretty much every county in the United States, if you are doing something that is of you, but it's not in your, if you're doing a business that's you, but you're not going by your first name, then you want to file what they call a certificate of assumed name. I don't know how this works for political parties because they're not a person doing business. The Oakland Greens political party, they did file a certificate of assumed name. They put a post about it on Instagram. So they found they needed it in their circumstance. So you might want to check with your county clerk about that to see if that's necessary. It's necessary for businesses that are sole proprietors that are going by anything other than the sole proprietor's name, but it might not be necessary for a nonprofit political party. So before we get into one more thing about the establishing a political organization in Oregon or elsewhere, do you have any questions, Joshua?
Oh no, so far we're good. Fortunately, Oregon doesn't have sales tax, so I wouldn't need to worry about sales tax here.
There you go. There you
Yep.
go.
Mhm.
So once you get the EIN, then what you can do is get a bank account. You can get a digital bank account, or you can get a physical bank account or credit union. For the political party I established in Texas, the first thing I did was get a PayPal. They require an EIN. So if you already got an EIN, like we mentioned, the employment identification number with the IRS, then you put that information into PayPal, and then they let you have a PayPal account. PayPal has an option where you can create a donate button. So it was very smooth for me to get on PayPal with the EIN I got. If you want to get a bank account, which is in addition to PayPal, the policies do vary from bank to bank and credit union to credit union. I would say overall, it involves you having to show your paperwork. If you did file as a corporation, a nonprofit corporation, then you want to show the state designating that. You want to show the articles, bylaws, and the mailings that the state sends out to you. Also, you want to show the EIN from the IRS, and then they would have you and whatever other officers sign. And my credit union, which is in Texas, they have different policies for the different types of accounts. They have a campaign account, they have a club account, they have a nonprofit account, and then they have business accounts. So they have different procedures and rules for each of those. Basically, what I mentioned earlier would be the general process. You would show them the paperwork. One more thing about this is when I lived in Minnesota, Minnesota had a requirement that I didn't see in Texas. And I didn't see it when I looked in Oregon. When I established a political party in Minnesota, I went to the bank and they said you had to register with the state. So I did register with the state. And then the state had a requirement where you had to what they call publish the notice of the organization forming. So after you either filed with state or you filed an assumed name with your county, then you would publish in a legal magazine. And unfortunately, they charge like $15. When I was researching this for other states, it looks like Google said there's only 4 states or so that still require that. So it's probably not something you'll have to deal with, but you may deal with that. So be prepared to deal with that. So that would cover the first part of establishing a political party, which is establishing the organization itself. So at this point, Joshua, do you have any questions?
I'm good so far. Now you mentioned these bylaws and articles of the charter.
Yes.
What kind of bylaws would those be? Or
what you can do is if you go to nolo.com, they do have, or you read Nolo books, you can look up sample bylaws and sample articles of incorporation. The articles of incorporation is a very simple document where you fill out some basic information, name, address, contact information, and then you make a statement about what your business does. That's pretty simple. The bylaws are a little more complicated because you have to create the procedures of the organization. When I incorporated my business with Nolo, they have a service for $300 back then is what it cost. I believe they lowered it since then. I put the information in there and they created bylaws for me. Now, I do not believe Nolo allows you to do political organizations as a form of nonprofit. They do allow you to use nonprofit. Still, you can look at sample bylaws to create it, or your state might have certain requirements in the bylaws. They might have requirements that you have to have elections every so often for the committee officers, or they might require a certain amount to vote, or they might require quorums for meetings, or the state might have very few regulations for that. So you want to check with your state about the specifics of the bylaws. And then you can also look at sample bylaws for other organizations in your state, especially political parties. So that might be something you can do is you can look for sample bylaws. When I was looking for doing it for a business, it was helpful to see sample bylaws. And if you read Nolo books, they do have sample bylaws for both businesses and nonprofits. They do have nonprofit books. And Nolo books are often at the library. So if you don't want to pay for a book, pay if you can, I would say. But if you can't get the books at the library or go on their website, they have information about that. So the bylaws, you want to look up more information about what they entail. And then the articles of incorporation is usually a straightforward document. The state has, if you want to do it yourself, the state will probably have a document for the articles of incorporation for your nonprofit if you want to do the nonprofit corporation route. If you're not going to do it by the state, if you're just being an unincorporated association for your political organization, then you don't have to worry about that. So that's another reason why you might want to go unincorporated, at least at the start, because then you don't have to worry about such things. And that way you can devote more energy into building your party, getting the procedures going, establishing viewpoints and platforms. So let us move on to the part about getting on the ballot. And this podcast, we discuss a lot of ballot access cases. And this is one thing I've noticed is very important to alternative parties is getting on the ballot. And like I said earlier, it is possible to get on the ballot without going through the other stuff. But if you do that, it would make me wonder is how would you function if you don't have a bank account, if you don't have officers? So you can get on the ballot, but you have to do the first part that we mentioned at some point anyways. So why not do that? And then you can get on the ballot. So this is what the Secretary of State in Oregon says, and your state is probably very similar. Number 1, it says, fill out form SEL 198. And that, I looked at that, it looks fairly straightforward, basic information about your party. And then also they said, because what you're going to do with that is use that for gathering. And as we all know, that's an important part of the process. When we interviewed Larry Sharp on this podcast, he said, wherever you go, wherever you do, there's always going to be a signature gathering to get on the ballot. And that's true according to the Secretary of State in Oregon. And then signature gathering number 3, in Oregon, they say is signature verification, where the state will look over that. And as we've discussed on this podcast, the ballot access can be challenged, and often is, by the Republicans and Democrats or some citizens or voters. They may not want your party on the ballot for whatever reason, or they might just want to be on a power trip. They might get a thrill of kicking down someone who is the underdog. Personally, I support the underdog. I like to root for the underdog and back the underdog, but some people like to kick the underdog down. So they may challenge that, and that's where the signature verification comes into play. So that we started the first part of the establishing a political party in Oregon in regards to ballot access. Joshua, do you have any questions?
I'm good.
Okay. The Secretary of State says it's 1.5% or 22,046 votes of the total votes cast in the jurisdiction for governor at the last election. And that's for if you're running for governor. They do have a different rule in Oregon. They do have a different rule for the lower races, which some call down ballot. They say, contact the elections division for down. I would like to mention how as we discuss these ballot access cases, and people who have done the ballot access process will attest, different states definitely have different requirements. Some states may only require 1,000 people. Others may require 20,000. It might vary on size. It might be arbitrary. So the states do differ on that. And that sums up the process of getting on the ballot in Oregon. You fill out that form, the SCL 198. You gather signatures, and then the signatures are verified. And if all goes well, you'll have enough signatures to get on the ballot. And if you did your homework before, when you get on the ballot, then you don't have to scramble to get a bank account and do all that stuff. You can have your political organization already in place, ready to go, and then you can hit the ground running, and I trust do great things in your campaign. So those are the two parts of establishing a political party in Oregon and elsewhere. Is one, you want to establish a nonprofit organization of some type, and then 2 is you want to get on the ballot so that your candidates can run for office. So there we go, Joshua. That's how we establish a political party in Oregon, and elsewhere is similar.
I'll have to get started on that process.
Excellent. Excellent. So how can our audience support your party?
For now, I've got the webpage purplepeoplesparty.org, and that just goes to my Facebook page, and mainly just getting more input from people, and anybody that wants to come on board into the party, that wants to help me lay this out, I'd be interested in. So that's
excellent.
Yeah.
So you want to have them go to your Facebook page?
For now, yeah, until I get something better.
All right. That sounds good. Joshua, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. I'm glad you asked me that question about establishing a political party, and I trust that will help whoever listens to this podcast to get going when they need to get a political party going.
All right. Thank you very much.
All the best to you and your party. Have a great day.